Hello, Dumelang Sambonani. A very warm welcome to your number one youth current affairs show. Of course, Skibelelaga Expressions. This is definitely the place for you to air your views. We're coming to you live from the M1 studios here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. I'm your host, Jacqueline Mapala.
Dimloke ukholosa kalubisi umadlongoti namhlanje ke si expressions sijonge ingxaki ezixananazileyo apha eMzantsi Afrika, where we see young men on the forefront when it comes to committing violence. This is after a 21-year-old male ethe wabulala kwaye wadlwengula 6 sex workers operating in Johannesburg Central. Le ngxoba kaxaka ke xa kumxhaka has raised a lot of concerns to ask into yokubana amadoda mawasabele. And the poll question is sikubuza yona apha ekhaya because we want you to be part of this discussion. Siyabuza into yokubana, is this violence a result of a neglected boy child?
Yes, Kholosa, that's a very important question because it is important to ask ourselves very critical questions around how exactly is society enabling an environment where young men feel that they can be violent? Are we socializing our young men properly? But before we get into this very important conversation, we hit the streets. Of course, you know how we are as Expressions, to find out what young people have to say about this very particular conversation. And this is what went down. Expressions hits the street of Joburg to find out from young people on the ground what they think about this culture of violence that is being committed by young people. And this is what they had to say.
Violence can be caused by anything, you know. It can be caused by the way someone grew up or the way they saw their father, you understand.
Probably they've never been raised pretty well in their backgrounds, in their houses. It's not that the parents and family have not been doing a good job.
There is too much pressure on the male figure. Like if you offer something to the table, most people about
violence is being caused by our beliefs. We don't have support as men.
Violence comes from many things, I would say. Morals, the way you were brought up, your environment, wrong time, wrong place. So it just all depends on the type of person, you know, where you come from. Violence has no color, it has no race, it has no gender.
Because violence yabana batuku ningori abakho support abana bathu bane babasedza banotanga zi role model dzavo and chishopesela abatangani sashishti, they don't unite, they just neglect each other.
At the end of the day, it's your choice, you understand. As a man, you should know what is right and what is wrong, you understand, towards women.
Okay, girlfriend onyokore ave submissive because then if I say submissive, we feel like she's disrespecting you and stuff. So yeah,
I think we need support. I think we need to unite and be together and face the challenges together.
So those were some of the comments from young people, but in particular, young men on the ground. And of course, as Expressions, we just need to correct the fact that it was allegedly. So it's allegedly that the 21-year-old murdered and raped those 6 workers. And it's, of course, a case that is still underway. But of course, to help me take this conversation further, I am joined by my esteemed guests. A very well welcome to Expressions.
Thank you so very much for having us.
It's good to have you. Hey, today we are just overrun by men. Hello, audience. And of course, Ukolosa is going to be bringing us some insights from our audience today. Hello, audience. Okay, so we're really looking forward to having this conversation with young men. I think, Sibonela, maybe let me start with you. You know, in the intro, we mentioned the 21-year-old, and we just want to understand as a nation, you know, what is the reason behind why a young person would do that to 6 defenseless women?
Thank you so very much for that, Jackie. So the only reason why somebody can hurt someone else is because they themselves are hurting on the inside. We are a bleeding society and a bleeding generation that is not dealing healthily with its own wounds. As a result, a lot of dysfunctions turn into norms. As a result of that, you are parents with your own childhood traumas, and then now you give birth to children wherein you have cultivated and also embraced certain dysfunctions in your way of handling life situations. So repeated exposure to dysfunctions, you grow up, you see your parents or maybe your neighbors dealing with problems in a certain way as a boy child. You see that as something that is normal, only to find that those people themselves are hurting, and that is why they deal with problems in a violent manner. So the boy child looks at that and then they embrace it, they take it as something normal.
And they see
Yes.
that obviously they clearly, using it as an example of how they need to express themselves. And of course, as expressions, we're not at all condoning violence, but we want to get to the heart and the root of why it is happening, because it's a problem. And I think, Buitumala, I want to bring you into this conversation. I mean, have the years of just not investing and empowering the boy child, and obviously purely focusing on the girl child, sort of come back to bite us as a society? Have we neglected the boy child? Is this why this is happening?
Sure. So there's a few things we already know, right? From a high-level criminal justice perspective, and one of those things is that young boys raised in single-parent households, specifically, in most instances, a single-parent household is a single-mother household, are far more likely to commit violent crime, and that the violent crime perpetrators more often than not come from single-parent households. This isn't because of a failure of single mothers, but it's an indicator that children need both parents in their lives, right? To role model, like you were saying, constructive behaviors, specifically constructive behaviors around conflict and the like. But I also think South Africa is a very, very conservative country with very, very entrenched gender norms, and that mixed with a long-standing culture of violence. We've always been a violent country. We've always been a country that solves disputes through violence, right? And throughout history, it's been a necessity where violence was necessary to entrench our rights as black people. But it's sort of morphed into I guess democratic South Africa as a means to assert your rights when no one else is going to help you do that, right? So when you mix that with the conservative culture and specifically the entitlement to women's bodies, then of course you're going to have a powder keg around violence. But like I said before, the importance of both figures and parents in a young boy's life to model functional and functional behaviors is critical.
Yeah, and mentorship, this exactly. Culture, this society of fatherless sons. I mean, a part of me even asked myself, like, what did we think would happen if young men don't have good role models? And Bongani, you're part of Not in My Name International. You deal with young men like this all the time. And I just want to find out from you, as a society, they say we need to read the signs. What is this violence committed by young men telling us about the state of young men, but most importantly, the state of our society?
Okay. Thank you, Jack. Yeah, there's a saying that says it's easier to build young boys than repairing broken men. Now, the problem is in two folds. You get young boys who doesn't have father figures, who are growing up from single-headed families, and they don't have role models that are men that they can model themselves around. The only thing that they see in their environment is thugs and criminals. And obviously, that's the voice that they know, that's the life they know, because they are validated by those people. Hence, it's easy for these thugs to influence them. And then most of the problems that we are incurring now is gangsterism in the community. So obviously, they want to be validated, and people who validate them is criminals. And also, when we come to older men, with all these problems that are growing up which are not resolved, the first thing is to start with remorse, because you cannot work with a person who's not remorseful. If a person is remorseful and then he understands the wrongs that he has done, then it's easy to come up with a program to help him to recover and realize, to say whatever he was doing is wrong, and then help him on a path of recovery and making sure that they become responsible men.
So, and I'm glad you're saying that, because, this picture that we like to create, this narrative of, these young men who do these heinous crimes are monsters, and, we need to just lock them away somewhere and all of that kind of stuff, as if that's the solution. It's important for us to understand that there is hope, and we need to definitely work on the boy child, because they are sons of this nation, and they just can't be left out into the cold like this. We continue with this very important conversation after the break. Kolos is going to be giving you views from our audience when it comes to this conversation around the culture of violence and whether this is a consequence of the neglect of the boy child. We continue with this conversation after the break. You're watching Expressions.
Welcome back. You are still tuning in to your number one youth show right here on SABC 1. It is Expressions. Namhlanje ke saqhubeka nokuthetha nomba oChisibunzi, young man committing violence. And omona mbuzo sikubuzayo apha ekhaya, do you feel that the society is neglecting the boy child? And it's interesting because namhlanje apha e studio we have young men. Hello guys, welcome to Expressions. Ni right? Sabelani, because lengxoxo ize kuni. I'd like to start with you guys on this side. What do you feel needs to be done to eradicate lombasi ubonayo? You can go ahead, Offense.
Okay. Personally, I think that the society has set a high bar that they demand too much from men, and they don't see that men personally are dying on the inside. We live by this code that's been passed down from our ancestors that monaki that he's weak or something like that. Because if he shows that he's weak, the society will view him as less than a man. But now the times are changed whereby it's okay for you to express that you're going through tough times, because we cannot expect all guys to be tough in this era. We live in a world whereby we say it's 50-50, right? So I think that what we must do now is educate the young generation that comes after us that it's okay to be weak. It's okay for you to fall down every now and then, because they say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So if you are trying to duck that thing that's going to make you stronger, at the end of the day, at the end game, you're still not gonna be strong, because it is what it is. You ran away from what can make you stronger, focusing on what will people say about you. And for me, that's like, it's like you're committing personal suicide. You're killing yourself on the inside, because you're worried more about people's opinions than what really matters. And what really matters is how you view yourself. Because I can come to you and say, don't do this, don't do that, but it's you at the end game who knows what you want. And this a thing of okay, if I grew up in a household whereby I don't have a father, then that means alternatively I'm gonna do crime. I believe that is actually wrong, because what happens is, if you know your moral compass, if you know that I want this and that, then there's no way the community around you can corrupt you, that you end up like the other guy, end up committing rape and killing other people.
Noted, Offense. Indeed, we need to eradicate the abantu bazothini syndrome. I want to get to you because, you work with a lot of young men. We are about groomer. Babe ngabadoda azawuqina ngomso. What do you think needs to be done? What kind of support do you think young men need uba singabi nazo ezi cases?
Firstly, I would like to agree with the fact that young men who are growing up without father figures, they are not proper within the community. Due to, I believe in the environment as a whole, it plays a big role in the upbringing of a young boy. What you see, as he said there, that we have idolized certain people in the community without really doing an introspection into them of what are they, what do they do. Just seeing them enjoying life with the materialistic things, and then we go with that rhythm of it's fine. And then if we are copying something from someone, you copy everything irrespective of, is it violence, is it proper or improper? With that being said, I'd like to say the environment that we are growing up in, it's empowering men into believing that to take space, you have to display your masculinity, and by displaying masculinity is that then we tend to be beating our women, we tend to be abusive the girl child. That's my case.
Very powerful. I want to get to you. You are so young. Do you feel that, the society is neglecting you as a boy child? Do you feel if society cares about you as this young boy child?
No, what can I say? Most of the time parents are like, I expect more from this girl child because she's a girl and you're a boy, you only use your strength and your mind. So I think most of the job, I think most of the people in the community think boy childs are useless.
Very powerful. Dean, I want to get into you to close this conversation. You know, as a successful businessman who is also a motivational speaker, you know, you deal a lot with young people, you know. Any words of encouragement? Because I also had this gentleman, you know, disagreeing with the fact that, you know, boy children, you know, they can still conquer without, you know, fathers. What is the role of a father figure?
So, you know, the world will show you you're a product of your environment. But if anyone turns around and says that a single mother's child is any more prone to violence than a one with a couple, I don't believe in that. I'm a single parent, a single child myself. I grew up, my dad died when I was 10 years old. Didn't change anything around it. There were still the people who had their parents who were in gangs. Even in my neighborhoods, there was people that were in gangs who were going out fighting at clubs every single weekend and prone to violence, killing people. So it's not you're a product of your environment, and unfortunately that environment does have a lot to do with financial means. We live in a country where our politicians are justifying, like you want to talk about a woman, you know, sex workers being raped, but when one of our politicians turns around and says, oh, it's because the one woman was wearing a short mini skirt. We need to get to the environment where we need to stop justifying having excuses as to bad behavior. I mean, accountability is the main thing people need to take. How many people do we have coming out of townships on a daily basis that are in Los Angeles, New York? Trevor Noah, Daily Show host. You know, these guys are products of the environment that fought against a system. So you put yourself into the own box of where you're sitting right now. So to turn around and blame it on any specific thing, the first thing you need to do is take a look at yourself. Anyone can change any situation they were in. And I've seen it time and time again. Age is not, it's merely a number. And unfortunately, yes, circumstances are a lot harder for some kids than it is for others. But don't ever sit there turning around blaming because of where you are and currently where you are as to what and why is happening. If you're in an area where you don't want to be, move yourself out of that area. Unfortunately, it is a lot harder in certain circumstances with single parents, but that to me does not generate violence. That is the kid probably fighting harder in life, coming up and taking less troubles, but it doesn't necessarily make him a more violent person. I mean, yeah, history will turn around and tell you through generations of no matter what race it is, that violence doesn't necessarily come with poverty or come with education. I mean, Jeffrey Dahmer and all these guys now on TV, if you look at it, the biggest serial killers in the world are the most educated people. So don't let education fool you as to crime. All right, it's got nothing, the two are not related.
Oh, yeah.
Desperation is.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, Din, and thank you so much, you know, you guys for coming through. Indeed, introspection is key. Expressions, this is the voice to air your views for you, to you, by you. We continue with this discussion. Let's go to the break.
We continue with this very important conversation that we're having today. And of course, we're coming to you live. We are talking about the violence that is committed by young men in our society. And we're asking ourselves very difficult questions around whether this is a consequence of the neglect of the boy child. And of course, so many insightful comments came from the audience. But gentlemen, we have to be able to wrap this conversation up. And I think for you, Sibonelo, we want to find out how do we break this pattern of violence among young men?
So one of the ways in which this pattern of violence can be broken is by abnormalizing violence. Violence has become a norm in our society. It's a normal thing to see a person being mugged and do nothing about it. You know, it's a normal thing for people to just fight and then nobody is stopping them. So we needed to deconstruct all of these myths surrounding the normalization of violence, especially by men, because I believe male children, they learn a lot from male figures. So it's male figures who need to deconstruct all of these myths surrounding the normalization of violence in order for this pattern to be broken.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, there's a saying that goes that when good men remain silent, evil prevails. What can the good young men in our society do to be part of the change?
Sure. So I think maybe we need to start there by the definition of good men. What is a good man, right? And I think we all need to take accountability and acknowledge our own capacity for violence, because even the good men have enormous capacity for violence, and this is something that we all need to take accountability for. So I think maybe we can have a conversation around what influential men can do. And I think, we had a comment around how we don't get enough young men and young boys don't receive enough mental health and mental illness support, and I think you touched on that earlier. Influential men can start by having vulnerable conversations with the young men that look up to them about how one can constructively navigate negative emotions and the challenges that one experiences when navigating life, but also just how do we navigate our relationships and interactions with women specifically.
Yeah. And for you, Bongani, I think the very important voice that needs to come out is, where are our fathers? Where are the uncles? Where are the role models? The influential men that Bitumelo is talking about. Why are we not seeing their intervention? Why are we not hearing their voices?
Yeah, true. We need to go back to the basics. And what has been happening, I know in a lot of communities, and also where I come from as well, what we do, we get around all men that are there and try to meet, not to meet as this men's conferences where we talk about how we can punish women, but we are talking about as men to say, guys, we are living in a very sick society. There's a lot of crime that has been committed by young boys. What is it that we can do? So in other words, we identify ourselves as men to say, how can we go back to the basics? Because one of the biggest problems in idle mind. Now, when people are idle, it's an opportunity for them to create crimes. Now, we go back now to say, okay, what is it that can be done? We look at sports, for an example. I mean, we make sure that young people become active in sports, in soccer, or any other sports that is there. And we also try to get these guys, men that are responsible, to be mentors, and then we club them up with these young boys so that we can try to create a positive society.
And again, and I'm going to reiterate this again, there's no easy solution to this, but I think it was critical for Expression to have this conversation from a completely different angle, where men feel heard, they feel like they are being understood, but there's a platform where they can maybe be vulnerable. So thank you so very much, gentlemen, for being part of the show and giving young men out there just insights around what they can do, but most importantly, for them to feel like somebody actually cares about them. And Expressions does. Audience, ralebohane, siabulela. Hey, today's show was really hectic, right?
It was, and what I can say is it is indeed in our power as young people to break this pattern.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I loved what Dean said, that it is not impossible. There is nothing that is impossible that young men in this country can't do. So you can definitely break that circle of violence. But from us ladies, and we were the only ladies today on the show, thank you so very much for watching. But as you know, Expressions will always go out in style. We are going to be giving you a performance from
from Anna O.
Anna
Pure Form. Enjoy.
Bye. Thanks for watching.
9840, how we represent. Get face start, the boy. Aye. Let's do this. So nice it is. Yeah, my style of rap is full time, it's here to bridge the gap. And I inflate sickness through this music, black Trojan. In the gallery, can even mad at me, corrupt your whole database and mess up with your salary, you're so broke. Matter of fact, your style is so